What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the show. Excited as always to have you guys here. Let's get right into it, right? We got the week six NFL. We got week six NFL, right? And we are about to hit up this DFS slate. We have a very interesting slate today. We are just getting some news recently here. One of the biggest news that we just got was about Michael Carter. If you guys have been starting Michael Carter is expected to not start today. We're going to get Bam Knight. That changes things. If you guys have been watching the show and listening closely in the waiver wire shows, I have mentioned before in the past that I think Bam Knight is the guy who's going to beat out Michael Carter and D. McCardle. Again, we don't know for certain if that is the ultimate play today because Michael Carter might still split the backfield with Bam Knight. So we don't have the exact information when it comes down to how much of a workload he has, but we did get the word that he will be starting. Again, that's Zonovan Bam Knight. If he happens to still be out there in some of your leagues, I would grab him, stash him, just in case something does pop off. Right now with Trey Benson, we haven't gotten much of an update, but it sounds like it still could be a while. So if Bam Knight ends up taking on this role, which I have felt that might be the case, he's a good pickup for sure. All right, before we get into this DFS slate, I just want to mention thank you once again for coming on to the show. Make sure if you're going to leave a comment as far as questions for your start sit questions, make sure to tell us how many teams are in your league. If it's a PPR, half PPR league, just give me that detail down below. If it's a 1v1, 2v2, that's perfectly fine. But yeah, just make sure to let me know what kind of scoring format and how many teams are in that league to help me make the best or help you make the best decision for these matchups today. All right, let's get right into it. We're going to talk about quarterbacks. There are several game environments that I am intrigued by today. I think this slate is a bit different from usual slates that we've had in the past. I say this every week. Obviously, every week is unique, but I don't think it's as the plays that you're about to get today doesn't feel as secure, as like confident going into it as the previous ones. So I want to make sure we take a very look at that. One of the main things I'm going to explain, we do not have Jalen Hurts in this slate, which is one of the top tier quarterbacks. We do not have Patrick Mahomes. We do not have Lamar Jackson, who is out. We do not have Josh Allen as well. So just kind of taking a look here at the quarterbacks that we have. Baker Mayfield is probably going to be the guy who leads this group of guys here in terms of obviously price point, but one of the guys that has a higher chance of possibly hitting their ceiling. Baker Mayfield is playing San Francisco. I think this is a game environment that I am very, very intrigued by. I think today, one of the ways that you can get different on this particular slate is to really lean in on stacks. I know that usually when you look up at these milli makers and you look up at top, sometimes some of these players aren't correlated. I think the team that won the millionaire last week had a Justin Fields team with Breece Hall. And ouch, saying Justin Fields, if you are watching that game right before I hopped on, that's been a rough go for the Jets team and for those who started any of those players this morning. Hopefully that works out here in the second half for some of y'all in terms of fantasy points. All right, we're getting right back into this. I'm going to run through this as quick as possible. So Baker Mayfield is a guy I'm intrigued by. If you're going to stack him, Emeka Egbuka is a guy you want to look at. Rachaad White is also taking on the role again. Bucky Irving is still out. So Rachaad White is intriguing alongside Baker Mayfield with Emeka Egbuka. If you're trying to get a little deeper into this, you got guys like Tez Johnson who had some type of a workflow last week and solid player. I think he's a little bit thinner of a play to get into today. But if you want to do a deeper stack on this game, Tez Johnson is not a bad way to go. Cade Otton is another name. Sterling Shepard, I do like because they have a rapport, but I'm not sure if I really love it in terms of this matchup. On the San Francisco side, we have Brock Purdy, who is out. Mac Jones is going to be the starting quarterback today. If you go back to what we've seen in the previous weeks, and this also goes for fantasy football, y'all, Kendrick Bourne is now, let's look at what his price is. But Kendrick Bourne, we already knew he had 10 catches for 140 plus yards last week. We could pull him up real quick here. He is 5,000, right? He had 10 receptions for 142 yards. Kendrick Bourne is a guy I'm intrigued by. Obviously, he's a Mac Jones kind of guy. They play together at New England. We've talked about this already in previous streams. Kendrick Bourne is a nice player to keep, to add into your stacks as far as that game and environment goes. I also like Jauan Jennings, who's going to have a Q tag on him, but is expected to play. Usually a Q tag. He's also cheaper than Kendrick Bourne, 4,800. Juan and Third is one of his nicknames out there in San Francisco. But yes, he has the kind of target share that I usually like to jump on. Jauan Jennings is a player that in Kyle Shanahan's offense has had a big role, even with Brock Purdy. I think he should be just fine with Mac Jones today at a bit of a lower ownership. I think he comes under 10% owned. Then you have Jake Tongs as the tight end, but Christian McCaffrey is going to be one of the popular plays today, and I still think he's very viable. If you just look at his targets as a running back, and if you're obviously playing him in fantasy football, right, in your home leagues, you start him. Don't question this. I hope you guys aren't questioning this. He hasn't gotten a rushing touchdown yet. So I'm expecting that even if we're giving him somewhat of a base floor of 20-ish fantasy points in a PPR format such as DraftKings, I expect them to get a higher total. I think we finally get him. I know they're playing Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is really good versus the run, but at some point we are going to expect this guy to get near the goal line and they hand it over to him and not Kyle Juszczyk or any of those other guys over there. Maybe I'm laughing later when we see Brian Robinson vulture a TD, but that's not the hopes, right? Our hopes is that CMC gets it full. And for 8,400, he's finally getting to that price point that he was usually in. But with this type of share that he has on the receiving end, I mean, he's playing like a wide receiver 1-2 over there. And then you have his running back shares. I mean, he's still a really good play. Should be much higher than this. 8,400 seems expensive, but with the way the kind of slate we're having today, I don't think you should be fading him by any stretch of the mean. All right, quarterbacks. I want to name two more quarterbacks. Jordan Love. Jordan Love, I think, is a really interesting play today. They are playing the Cincinnati Bengals. I think that just as much as I've talked about stacks in general, I think that Jordan Love is a little harder to stack. You want to stack them, but finding out who those guys are to stack them. Josh Jacobs will be playing, obviously, versus the Cincinnati Bengals defense that hasn't been able to do well stopping the run. I think he's also a great play. But if I'm playing Jordan Love, I think Tucker Kraft is a great play today. I think Tucker Kraft is one of my favorite tight end plays today. I'm going to be probably playing him today. I'm thinking about playing only one lineup just based off how this slate goes. I want to take some strong stances, but Jordan Love is in my pool of quarterbacks that I am intrigued by today. So yeah, Jordan Love, if you're looking to stack him, Tucker Kraft and possibly Matthew Golden. Real quickly here before I name my other quarterback, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to jump in. For those who are just jumping on right now, leave the comment if it's a half PPR league and how many teams are in that league to help me better answer your questions. All right, the quarterback that I'm going to name here, it's kind of a dirty name here because he's kind of low, but Cam Ward. All right, he's playing Vegas, y'all. Vegas defense has been awful. Do not play him in your home leagues, okay? This is strictly daily fantasy advice, suggestion, whatever you want to call it. Cam Ward is a guy I'm really intrigued by, even if I'm playing one lineup. Man, I've been sold on this guy all week long. I was watching a little bit of that Arizona game. I rewatched that game. This week, I got to watch some of that again. And after seeing what pulled off in the second half, some of those throws that he made, one of the beautiful throw that he threw to Calvin Ridley, quite easily could have been one of the best throws I've seen all regular season. from any quarterback. It was that good of a throw. If you haven't seen it, you should look back into that. But yes, Calvin Ridley. If I'm mentioning Cam Ward, I love Calvin Ridley today. We finally saw a really good game from him last week. I think he pays that off again this week versus a really bad secondary for the Las Vegas Raiders, who really can't stop a lot of the explosive plays. And if you watched Calvin Ridley last week, so if you do have him in leagues, I would be starting Calvin Ridley. I think that he's a great play today. It obviously depends who you're starting him over, but I think he's a player that I would be prioritizing today. I think Cam Ward, Calvin Ridley stacks, and if you're trying to get a little bit more out of these stacks, because I think going all in on stacks today is the way to do it. I think Gunnar Helm at tight end. You're probably wondering who that is. He's the guy who's basically taking Chigakonkwu's role at the tight end spot. Gunnar Helm is cheap today, 2,700. I think he's got routes to have a much better game. 4 receptions, 5 targets for 34 yards. One of those great catches that Cam Ward threw and Gunnar Helm caught was one of the better plays out of that game. All right, that's quarterbacks, right? And I'm obviously naming some of the stacks. Want to get to running back real quickly. Mention Christian McCaffrey. Josh Jacobs has a great matchup this week. Jonathan Taylor. Okay. Jonathan Taylor, you're seeing it right here, right? Looking at his fantasy points, he's had 3 30-plus point games. It's just so hard at this point not to play him, and even for this price point, right? He kind of gets these numbers. I think Daniel Jones has a little bit of a tougher matchup today. I still think he's a decent start. I won't be playing him in daily fantasy. I think he's a guy that I plan to fade. I do like Jonathan Taylor for this game. I think Arizona, the way that defense kind of plays, that Jonathan Gannon defense, I think they do a little bit more to stop the passing game, which kind of opens up more room for Jonathan Taylor to get work here. I think Jonathan Taylor is a great play, and I think that if you're going to correlate anybody from that game, I do want to mention a wide receiver shortly here, but let me get to these quick running backs here. Javonte Williams is already, at this point, what can we say about Javonte Williams? He's giving you a base floor of anywhere from 16 to 25 points a game. He's playing out great. These outlier games right here, right? These 29 fantasy points. And I think he's still fully capable of getting you a 30-plus fantasy point game. That's the type of player that's really hard to fade at this point. That offense is really running through a lot of what he does as well. I know that they're one of the top 5 offenses in the league in terms of passing yards and such, but it really helps to have a good run game getting that out there. So I think Javonte Williams is a good play today. I would definitely consider him. I think Derrick Henry it's weird to say Derrick Henry is sneaky because we're looking at fantasy points under 10 points here. We had one great week from him. I think today is that type of game that we can probably see out of him. I think we're expecting rain and some high winds in Baltimore today. I think that the Rams are going to be the team that most of the exposure is going to go to. Obviously, Puka Nacua is so hard not to play at this point with the way he's playing week in and week out. Devontae Adams is a great play on the other side. But to play Derrick Henry is also understanding that it's very game script dependent. So playing Derrick Henry is knowing, all right, if they are running ahead and they get to an early lead, this guy's going to go. He's going to go. There's no Lamar Jackson. They're going to try to run this offense all through him. I expect them to start the game really pushing Derrick Henry to start and run that whole entire offense. I think Cooper Rush can possibly do enough to keep the game within range. And I like guys like Zay Flowers today. I think Isaiah Likely could be very sneaky, and that's mainly because of his price point. He is 2,800 at the tight end position. Okay. Running back here, we went through a few names. Chase Brown could be intriguing. I think one of the fun stats that I read today was, yes, Green Bay is one of the better run defenses in the league. They are very hard to play against. Now, 5,600 is very low for a Chase Brown player. The offensive line for the Cincinnati Bengals hasn't been good, but this is PPR. So if he's giving you 10 to 11 fantasy points, 13 fantasy points, right? that doesn't cut it where you want to get it, right? But if you're seeing these 8 targets, 7 receptions, very low yardage, Joe Flacco, in very small sample size, within the couple games that he started for the Cleveland Browns, was targeting his running backs at about 8.5 targets per game. So that plays huge for a guy like Chase Brown. I think Jake Browning plays, Joe Flacco is going to play a lot better than Browning did for this team. I don't expect Joe Flacco to come in there as well and kind of be this game manager guy that he was for the Cleveland Browns. I think they're bringing Joe Flacco to kind of save the season, if you want to say. So I think he's going to be chucking the ball just a tad bit more, a little harder to staying strong in that pocket, right, with that kind of offensive line. But I think it's a good week to give a shout out for Jamar Chase and Joe Flacco. All right, guys, I'm going to get through these real quick, I promise. I'm at the wide receiver position. Make sure to leave your questions. We will get to them in less than 5 minutes here. Puka Nacua, 8,700, high price point, right? Still a great play, one of the popular plays today. We have Jamar Chase at 7,700. I still am intrigued by Jamar Chase. And if you played him last week after I touted him out, very, very low ownership for Jamar Chase last week, and he gave you 32 fantasy points. We're hoping for something similar to that this week. Now with Joe Flacco there, they literally did that same game plan we talked about last week. Jackson Smith-Njigba is also a really good play. JSN, they're playing Jacksonville, and also this offense is running through him. I think that one of the fun things about JSN, his advanced metrics show that he kind of plays a very similar role to Puka Nacua in terms of target share and volume for the role that he plays. They move him around everywhere. I really like what Clint Kubiak is doing with Jackson Smith-Njigba. We saw a really strong week from Sam Darnold. I think we can trust in that, in knowing that Sam Darnold can get JSN the ball versus outside some other quarterbacks out there that we try to talk about. And Emeka Egbuka is the only guy there. Chris Godwin's out. Mike Evans is out. Emeka Egbuka is going to be one of the popular plays today just because this offense is very concentrated. I just spoke about Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay offense. I wanted to name the Arizona guy to correlate with the Indianapolis Colts, and that is Marvin Harrison Jr. I think that he's going to be one of my popular plays today. I am taking a prop on him. I like the ladders on him. I think that he's going to have a much better game. And why is that? No Kyler Murray. I'm not worried now. And I know it sounds kind of funny because Jacoby Brissett isn't going to beat the world here, but I think Jacoby Brissett finds a way to get Marvin Harrison the ball a lot better. He'll probably see over the field or over his linemen's a lot better than Kyler Murray has. I expect this offense to do enough to keep this game within range so that there's some competitive edge. I think that this is a game I'm starting to get really, really intrigued by, and shockingly from the Arizona offense side of things. I think that at some point we're going to have to see them blow up. But if you look at the last game, 5 quarters or so of Marvin Harrison Jr., it has looked promising. It really does. And it's good to finally see him play at this level. All right, we're going to get to tight end. There's obviously a few other wide receivers that I'm intrigued by, but, Calvin Ridley, I mentioned Juwan Jennings. I think that, Rashid Shaheed, if you're not playing Olave, who's one of the popular plays today and rightfully so, I think Shaheed is a really good pivot off of that play. All right, tight end here. We'll get to tight end, and then I'm going to get to your questions. I know we're about an hour away from lock, and I want to make sure you guys have time to put those lineups together. We have tight end Trey McBride. I already spoke on my interest in that Arizona offense today, in hoping that game kind of stays close and brings out enough fantasy points. Jake Ferguson, if I'm not mistaken, is currently second in the league in terms of receptions. He's been having an amazing role, obviously a top 5 tight end in fantasy football. Jake Ferguson, as long as CeeDee Lamb has been out, has taken on a massive, massive role. Jake Ferguson, if you are playing him in your fantasy league, obviously do not bench this guy. And I think you guys are smarter than that. Make sure you're starting him. I think that while, again, CeeDee Lamb is out, we're expecting to see him next week, week 7. Jake Ferguson is a strong play. Carolina doesn't do a really great job at defending the tight end position. I think Jake Ferguson has another strong outing. Brock Bowers is out. So that leaves room for a guy that I've touted before in one of my props, Michael Mayer, 3,100. I think Michael Mayer, when you look at this offense, this is a former second-round pick, a guy that this Raiders team have liked and are going to probably feature it a little bit more in today's game. If you saw how they kind of deployed the guys last week with no Michael Mayer or Brock Bowers banged up, I should say, you kind of saw the way they were using Albert O, Ian Thomas. They were getting these guys involved a lot. Tight ends really play a big part in this offense. The Raiders overall don't have a lot of weapons, but if you are looking into the receiver position, you have guys like Jacoby Myers, Trey Tucker, and even Jack Betch, who's another guy who could be really sneaky today. If you're playing them, we expect Geno to have a bounce back, but Geno's been looking really, really bad to start the season. I like this game environment. I mentioned Cam Ward and where I'm looking into. So if I plan to stack this game entirely, I'm going to want some Raider pieces, and Michael Mayer is not a bad place to start. I mentioned Gunnar Helm and obviously Tyler Warren. We already know the type of player he's been so far this season, very solid, even still being under 5,000. He has a much better role. And then Tucker Kraft, I mentioned, is one of my favorite plays today. And then Darren Waller. Let's not forget about Darren Waller, y'all. If you have him in your regular season leagues, his snaps are starting to increase, and look at what he's already done in these past 2 weeks. 17 fantasy points and then 18 fantasy points. That's crazy. This guy is playing so well right now. He's kind of hard to bench at this point. You kind of want to ride the waves. Defense, if you guys are looking for some defenses today, it's tough. In terms of usually you're paying up for some of these defenses, but I think one that you may want to consider if you're looking for a cheap defense to play today so that you can get to some of the higher price players, I would say it's the Miami Dolphins. This is again for daily fantasy. I would not be starting them in your regular season leagues. Please don't. But yes, I would start here. This is where I would say 2,200 for a Dolphins team going up against a Los Angeles Chargers team that's completely, it just feels like they're decimated. They've lost their two best tackles. Their running back is out, and we're getting news that he might even be out longer, and that's Omarion Hampton. We'll find out if Hassan Haskins or Kamani Vildell is the one guy. They're saying it's Haskins today to take on a lead role. I still think Vildell is the guy that ultimately takes on that role. But remember, now we're hearing the news of Omarion Hampton, so they're going to have to make that decision soon. If not, they're going to go into the trade deadline and possibly get themselves another back. That's all that I have as far as daily fantasy goes. Let's get right into these questions. Thank you guys for hopping on. Let's see what we got here. I know Bam is starting, but how many reps you think Carter's getting? I know we just talked about this. This one's interesting, y'all. I think Bam ultimately is the guy they're gonna like. He was also a darling of theirs during the preseason, right? Off-season work. They really liked Bam Knight so much that they didn't bring back a guy like DJ Dallas, who was someone that they loved a lot, especially going into last couple years, right? So I think for now we don't see Carter fully disappear, right? But I don't know if he becomes very difficult. I don't think I'm starting Bam today. It really just depends on how, if your decision is coming from like Haskins or Bam, you're probably leaning Haskins because you kind of heard a little bit of what his role may be and his connections with Jim Harbaugh. But man, I think Carter is tough, man. It's tough to go down that route. So if you have to start Carter today and you have no other options, then all the best of luck to you guys. We have Danny Marrero who hopped on. Mark Andrews, Zach Ertz, or Jawan Johnson. PPR, I'm leading Jawan today, or Ertz versus the Bears, sadly. I'm going to just say Jawan Jennings. Zach Ertz, he's good, obviously, but I don't feel his role is as strong as it once was last year. Yes, it's a guy that Jaden Daniels still leans on, but with Terry McLaurin getting healthy now and being back, and then we're expecting Deebo Samuel to play tomorrow. He's obviously just becoming a third, fourth option. I think Jawan Jennings, I know he didn't have a strong week last week, but I still think he has a really good role. They use him a lot as a big slot tight end, big slot receiver over there in New Orleans. And New Orleans, has a tendency, they're not a great team and a great offense, but they find ways to still come up with more plays on the field, and that's a lot of credit to Kellen Moore. I think Jawan Jennings might be the better play, in my opinion, today. All right, y'all. We have gotten to that point. I want to make sure you guys have enough time to get to your lineups. Make sure to follow me on Instagram and on TikTok. On the bottom, there's a ticker giving you guys my usernames for each social media platform. I'll be back on next week once again, same time. Looking forward to dropping a little more things this week. And make sure you guys keep an eye out for that. Thank you for those who've been watching the waiver wire shows. Once again, feel free to keep sending me messages, ideas you guys have, and just overall some comments. And I love to chop it up with y'all in terms of fantasy football. Thank you guys once again. Appreciate y'all hopping on. Peace.